In 2015, you could have bought a share of Nvidia for about $5. Nobody would have blamed you for walking past it. It was a company that made graphics cards for video games, run by a man in a leather jacket who talked about pixels like they were going to change the world. A decade later, that $5 share is worth over $130, split adjusted, and Nvidia is worth more than the stock market of most countries combined. Not because it got better at video games, because it stumbled, almost by accident, into owning the one thing every powerful company on earth suddenly needed. Here's why this matters right now. Not as some old success story you already know the ending to. Every major tech company on the planet is currently in a spending war. And the thing they're fighting over isn't oil or real estate or even talent in the usual sense. It's chips. Specifically, Nvidia's chips. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Meta, they're collectively spending hundreds of billions of dollars a year building data centers, and a huge share of that money flows straight into one company's bank account. When the richest corporations on earth are begging for your product and still can't get enough of it, you've stopped being a business. You've become a choke point. So, how did a gaming company end up controlling the plumbing of artificial intelligence? The story starts with something almost boring. In 1999, Nvidia invented a chip called the GPU, the graphics processing unit. Its entire purpose was rendering video game worlds, calculating thousands of tiny triangles and pixels at once so that a game could feel smooth and realistic. A regular computer chip, the CPU, is brilliant at doing one complicated task at a time, very fast, one after another. A GPU is different. It's not as clever at any single task, but it can do thousands of simple tasks all at the same time. For 20 years, that difference mattered only to gamers. Then, quietly, in university research labs around 2012, researchers training early AI systems noticed something strange. The math behind neural networks, the systems that let a computer recognize a cat in a photo or predict the next word in a sentence, wasn't actually that complicated. It was millions of small, repetitive calculations happening at once, which is exactly what a GPU was built for. Nobody at Nvidia had originally designed their chips for this. Researchers just discovered that gaming hardware happened to be the perfect shape for a completely different problem, and Nvidia was smart enough and fast enough to notice. Here's the part where the story stops being lucky and starts being deliberate. Most companies would have treated that as a nice side market. Nvidia's CEO, Jensen Huang, went all in. In 2006, years before anyone cared, Nvidia had already built a software layer called CUDA, letting programmers use GPUs for general computing, not just graphics. For almost a decade, CUDA looked like a solution in search of a problem. Wall Street questioned why Nvidia kept pouring money into it. Then AI research exploded, and suddenly every serious lab on Earth was already trained, by necessity, to build on Nvidia's software. Competitors could copy the hardware eventually. Copying an entire decade of software habits baked into every AI researcher's workflow was a different problem entirely. That's the uncomfortable math nobody likes to say out loud. Nvidia's advantage was never really about the fastest chip in a given year. It was about controlling the language everyone else was forced to speak. Switching away from Nvidia doesn't just mean buying a different piece of hardware. It means rewriting years of code, retraining teams, and betting your company's AI strategy on unproven alternatives. So even when rivals build chips that look competitive on paper, most of the industry stays locked in, the same way you don't switch operating systems just because a cheaper one exists. It also helps to understand the man who made this bet in the first place. Jensen Huang co-founded Nvidia in a Denny's diner in San Jose in 1993. And for most of the company's history, he wasn't considered a visionary so much as stubborn. Nvidia nearly went bankrupt in its early years, surviving a brutal collapse of the graphics card market in the late 1990s through sheer luck and a last-minute product that happened to work. Huang has talked openly about running the company as if it were 30 days from going out of business. Decades after that stopped being remotely true. That paranoia turned out to matter, because it's exactly why Nvidia kept investing in CUDA through a decade where it made no obvious financial sense. Most CEOs answer to shareholders demanding quarterly results. Huang kept funding a software platform that wouldn't pay off for 10 years, and it's hard to imagine a board of directors at almost any other company tolerating that kind of patience. Now, here's where hype and reality start pulling in different directions. The hype says Nvidia simply builds the best chips, full stop, end of story. The reality is messier and more interesting. Nvidia doesn't manufacture a single chip itself. Every processor carrying its name is actually built by TSMC, a Taiwanese company operating some of the most advanced factories on the planet. Nvidia designs the chip, TSMC physically builds it, and that entire supply chain runs through one small island sitting extremely close to a much larger, occasionally hostile neighbor. Nvidia's trillion-dollar empire, in other words, rests on a manufacturing process it doesn't own, in a location it can't fully control. And the demand itself is stranger than it looks from the outside. A huge portion of Nvidia's revenue currently comes from a small handful of companies, the same tech giants racing to build AI systems, spending enormous sums partly because they're terrified of being left behind if a competitor gets there first. That's not necessarily rational demand driven by proven profits. It's fear-driven demand. Companies spending billions today on the belief that AI will justify it eventually. If that belief cracks, if AI spending doesn't pay off the way investors expect, the same chips fueling Nvidia's rise could just as easily fuel its fall. And competitors haven't been sitting still, even if it looks that way from the outside. AMD makes its own AI chips. Google has spent years quietly designing custom processors specifically to reduce its dependence on Nvidia. Amazon and Microsoft are doing the same, building internal chip programs so they're not entirely at the mercy of one supplier's pricing and availability. None of this has dethroned Nvidia yet, but it matters. The same customers buying Nvidia's chips today are simultaneously funding research to need them less tomorrow. That's not paranoia on Nvidia's part. It's just what happens when your biggest customers are also some of the most capable engineering organizations on the planet. There's a quiet irony sitting underneath the entire empire. Nvidia became essential by making chips for people who wanted to render video game explosions. It ended up building the infrastructure for technology that might reshape employment, warfare, and information itself, almost as an accident of physics. The same parallel processing trick that makes a video game character's hair look realistic turned out to be the exact same math needed to predict human language. Nobody planned that convergence. It just happened to work, and one company happened to be positioned perfectly when it did. Zoom out, and the bigger picture gets uncomfortable fast. Governments have noticed that whoever controls advanced chips effectively controls the pace of AI development everywhere. The United States has restricted which Nvidia chips can be sold to China, treating semiconductors the way countries once treated nuclear technology, as something too strategically important to let flow freely. That turns Nvidia from just a company into something closer to a geopolitical asset, caught between government export rules, a fragile supply chain running through Taiwan, and customers spending money they haven't necessarily earned back yet. So, is Nvidia actually worth trillions? Or is this the story of the right bet at the right decade, one that could unwind as quickly as it built? Maybe both things are true. The chips are genuinely essential right now. Data centers cannot currently be built without them in any meaningful volume. But essential today doesn't guarantee essential forever. Every dominant technology company in history believed its advantage was permanent, right up until someone found a cheaper way to solve the same problem, or the demand driving them turned out to be thinner than it looked. Nvidia didn't set out to become the most valuable company on Earth by building AI infrastructure on purpose. It built graphics chips for teenagers playing video games, and the future arrived wearing the same math. The real question isn't whether Nvidia deserves its current valuation. It's whether the trillions being spent on AI actually produce something valuable enough to justify it, or whether the entire industry is quietly betting everything on a bill nobody has proven they can pay.